Welcome back. 5:06 on this Wednesday afternoon. A lot of news stories today. Again, just reporting, you heard it on the news with Jason a minute ago, the death of Charlie Kirk. A young man, he was 31 years old, a close ally of Donald Trump, shot today while delivering a speech at a university campus. Scott Reid is on the line. Our feature, of course, is brought to you by the folks at Guaranteed Industries, reminding you they've now teamed up with Can-Air. So if you want to get ready for what's coming, that'd be winter, and stay nice and toasty warm, give them a call. Been in business since 1957, serving Montrealers. 514-342-3400. Scott, I mentioned the story, so let's begin with this. Obviously, I'm watching some of the reporting on this already, and I think more than anything, people are just stunned.
No question. It was such a dramatically violent event. I mean, the footage is all over the place. He's seated on a stool. You see his head move back. You see the shot. This is an act of extraordinary political violence, and it's occurring in a context of increasing political violence, where those who are involved in politics, independent of political stripe, no matter which side of the aisle you're on, are being targeted. We're no longer in an environment where people say, I don't like what that person is saying, and I'm going to disagree with them. Now people are saying, I'm going to pick up arms, and I'm going to try to put an end to them, and someone has put an end to Charlie Kirk. I will say this as well. We will remember this day, and we may regret, beyond just the loss of life, what's occurred here, because America is in the closed fist of a culture war. That is what its politics have come down to. It's no longer about economics. It's no longer about foreign policy. It's no longer about jobs and growth. The fundamental driver of American politics is culture. And I really, really worry about where this leads us in the days ahead. This could become a bonfire.
Yeah.
This could become a polarizing, divisive, dividing, and deeply violent event. And I think it's one of those occasions where you look to your political leaders to lower the temperature. And I'm very fearful that we will see political leaders in the United States seek to raise the temperature, and potentially with disastrous consequences.
Well, to your point, the person in charge right now leading that country, not exactly the kind of guy to, turn the heat down. He usually turns the heat up. So you're right. The next few days will be very, very important. And I don't know, this idea of the culture we live in, at least south of the border, that culture, you wonder sometimes, Scott, if that's becoming, something we're dealing with more and more in this country.
Well, the political history of Canada is undeniable. We import practices and habits from the United States. Sometimes it takes a short while, sometimes it takes a long while. But what happens first in the United States generally visits us here. And that can be mundane. That can be like, oh, well, they've invented something called direct mail or social media or hard negative ads. Or it can be something more toxic, more acerbic, more damaging. And I really hope that what we witnessed today is not the beginning of a new political example that will be followed here, because that was a disturbing thing that occurred, and it's going to be followed, I fear, by more disturbing images, words, acts, and rhetoric.
Yeah, sadly, I think you may be right. All right, let me talk about what happened here today. Cabinet shuffle, it's been telegraphed now for weeks. I think that's probably fair to say. Nothing, I don't think all that significant today. What did you make of what you saw?
I know this sounds like the simplest and most reductionist analysis, but my view is this does not change anything. The frame, the inexorable forces that guide political history feel so dug in against Legault right now. And you look at this and you say, well, what could your possible objective be? So Barndell is gone, and so Guilbeault has been demoted slightly. There are a handful of newcomers elevated. But does any of that make a real difference? And I have to tell you, from my long experience in politics at the federal and provincial level here in the province of Ontario, people in politics and people in the media tend to exaggerate the significance of cabinet shuffles. I can hardly think of one that mattered. Certainly I can hardly think of one that rescued a government. Yeah. And that is, to be honest, what Legault is looking for. He's looking for a cabinet shuffle that won't just change the channel, but that will rescue him. That will rescue him from a descent that looks unstoppable. And so, there's lots to be said about individual ministers and who's a winner, who's a loser, and why this person was picked and why that person was picked. But the fundamental question is, does any of this change much? And I think the answer is nope.
Yeah, I think that's, there are not some names in here that came out of nowhere and suddenly have cabinet posts. He's just shuffling some chairs around. I don't think there's anything in here that's eye-opening enough. We lost an education minister to a different education minister. Health minister staying on. I don't think there's a lot in here either. But I don't know if you heard the clip. There was a clip of Francois Legault today who sounds actually a bit more defiant now, talking about having to cut and stuff. We haven't heard that kind of stuff from him in a while. But again, maybe this is just a case of too little, too late. It changes nothing. We shall see. Scott, Prime Minister came out today, and I'm sorry, did he adopt more conservative policy? What did I miss today?
No, but I don't think he did. I don't know that he did, but he telegraphed a couple of coming announcements. So first of all, he said that tomorrow we're going to see the first list of so-called major projects. Now that he has his major projects office, we saw the Globe and Mail was reporting a potential version of a list from various provinces and in various sectors. Then he said next week we're going to see the unveiling of the Build Canada Homes initiative, which is his answer to how we're going to build many more homes much more faster in markets all across the country. I think what's interesting about this will be the politics of this first list of major projects. So where will the first projects be from? How many will be? And because that people divvy these things up and they look by sector and they look by province. So how many from Quebec? How many from Alberta? How many from British Columbia? Oh, there's not a pipeline. Well, there's no private sector proponent of a pipeline. Well, what about the Port of Churchill? Well, why the Port of Churchill? Doesn't they have ice? What about another church? So we're going to see this. And already the province of Ontario was signaling its disfavor. It doesn't think that it's being given enough credit. So it's going to be very fascinating to see that list and what the political reaction is. And my bet is it'll be intense in the province of Quebec, just as will be all around the country.
Scott, I want you to listen to this clip from Mark Carney earlier today. Give me your reaction to this.
This government is committed to reforming the criminal code to ensure that organized crime, gang crime, crime with handguns, home invasions, auto theft, that the individuals who participate in those crimes pay the price they should with consecutive sentencing, that they are not in a position where they commit a crime one day and they're arrested and then out on bail the next. So bail reform being at the heart of it. We're committed to having more officers at our border, 1,000 more border agents, more RCMP, committed to working more closely with the provinces. And I'll give you a specific example with respect to the last. We've been working with the Council of Federation, all the provinces, on bail reform. We will be legislating on that. We're proposing legislation, I should say, to the House on that next month.
All right. So that was kind of what I was referring to in terms of, conservative. That's music to Pierre Poilievre's ears, I think, isn't it?
Well, maybe he's got to be careful what he wishes for. If Carney moves too far and too fast, he could find himself with one less issue to campaign on, and that's really what we've heard from Poilievre over the course of the summer, which is he's saying, well, those are really my ideas, and I ought to get credit for it. But that's loser talk in politics. My guess is he won't go as far as Poilievre wants, and Poilievre will always be able to go further.
Right.
There's kind of offensive and defensive issues in politics. Like if you're Carney and it comes to bail reform and crime, you've got to act. You've got to say the things he was saying there, because the intensity of that issue was really starting to grip people, particularly in the in the Lower Mainland of British Columbia and in the Greater Toronto area. And so you've got to move on that. But he's moving for defensive reasons. He wants to eliminate that issue as a point of political vulnerability, whereas Poilievre wants to use that issue offensively as an opportunity, as something that he drives, as something that garners him votes, not just doesn't lose him votes. Very different approaches, even though they sound kind of similar, because they're coming from very different places.
We'll leave it at that. Scott, thank you so much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.